So if you're a D2C fashion brand trying to crack it in a heavily discounted sort of market, wherein all the platforms that you're putting your brand on are eating away all your wafer thin margins, the question that you have to ask is, what color is your story? What color is your T-shirt? Janavi, can you set the context up for this one?
Yeah. So D2C market has been booming in India, especially when it comes to fast fashion and fashion retail. So recently, within the last 1 to 2 years, we've seen companies like Snitch, Miragio, Berry Blush, Bold Fit, Rare Rabbit, Yoko get millions of dollars of funding. Everything is above $5 million, etc. So this sets the landscape that companies like Mintra and Ajio, which are primarily marketplaces for fashion retails, they might be looking at a stagnating market, and the D2C companies or the brands that have a story to tell or have some differentiating products with them have started to realize that marketplace dependency is cutting their margins, cutting their growth, right? So our context is how to help these D2C brands make a niche for themselves in the market with the growing e-commerce and Q-commerce players with very heavy supply chains, lot of capital backing with them, and lot of warehousing facilities, infrastructure, etc., etc. How to beat them through one X denominator or differentiator, which is the story.
Yeah, no, so very interesting. So let's take a step back, right? A wonderful setup for the context. I saw all the links that you sent me, like Rare Rabbit and Snitch and all of those guys, right? And I think that there's some really tempting products out there for the right target audience, but I think that they're playing to a very tired playbook. Okay, all of them, and I mean this as no disrespect. These guys might be future clients for us, so who knows? But the fact is that if I look at the way in which the playbook is, it is talking about products and how beautiful their T-shirt is, and it reminds me of at Mica, what we used to do is encourage people to start their own ventures. And a lot of people, especially Michaels, see this T-shirt that I'm wearing. It is done by a Michael. It's called Cult, and it's a beautiful T-shirt, and it's got a lovely thing at the back, which I cannot show right now. But the fact is that, if, sir, we want to start a T-shirt business. So okay, cool. So the problem was that when they started entering that, they realized that unless and until they are actually meaning something beyond the T-shirt, beyond the fashion that they're doing, it was finding no traction. And that is literally the problem statement for any D2C fashion brand. Here there is this reducing margin that is coming for good T-shirts, good product, and the second is the absence of something which is deeply meaningful, deeply human, that people can connect to. And the bigger brands have already done this. Think of Patagonia, for example. But
Yeah.
if I have to look at all these new upcoming would be unicorns, Janavi, what do you think lies in store for them as far as their personas are concerned? Who is the persona, or who are the personas that we are talking to?
Yeah. So we are talking to the companies now, taking from the problem statement, right? The biggest problem that these companies are facing are two. One is they have a very high CAC. Now,
Yeah.
for example, you take Very Lush. It has a CAC of rupees 395, while its average order value is only 1200. So that's a very small margin to play with. And Very Lush is a company that is depending around 85% of its sales from marketplaces like Myntra and Flipkart. So the growth opportunity becomes very less. Now secondly, these companies are facing a very big retention problem because of marketplaces, and like you said, there are no differentiators. These are yet another t-shirt companies, or these companies are basically catalogs rather than brands, right? So for me, maybe a soul store might not differ from a Bewakoof at some point of time, because both of them have collaborations with Marvel or DC, etc. So the product line is becoming very similar. The persona that we are speaking to are the companies who have a differentiator, that maybe might be playing on the quality or might be playing on the sustainability, like Patagonia, for example. They have some North Star, they have some backing that doesn't just play on the vanity metrics or KPIs like your average order value or average cart value, etc. The companies that need to reach a certain point, build their own brand so that they can build their own D2C platforms in separation to, or in competition with the Mintras and Flipkart, so that dependency is reduced at, I would say, to 0%.
No, this is really interesting because you've said so many different things, right? First of all, in the D2C area, right? If I'm looking at the trends seem to be the commoditization of the entire market because I'm getting wafer thin margin. So that's one. The second is that D2C brands are launching their own beautiful product lines. And the most critical thing that you mentioned is that most people use or bandy this term around called North Star very easily, and they kind of conflate it with goals, right? So the goals can be about profit, can be about revenue. Yeah, I mean, this is where we are trying to go. The weird thing is North Star not just means that, but it also means the purpose that you stand for, right? When you look at a purpose that you stand for, if you look at Ben and Jerry's, for example, or if you look at Patagonia, especially if you're talking of fashion, then you begin to understand that the North Star is that is what you should mean to your persona outside. Now, I was just wondering, for this persona, and let's assume that Gen Z right now are the tastemakers. So let's assume that there are people who are in the taste making target segment of Gen Zers who are going for North Star. You also see a trend wherein people are very concerned about the way in which their carbon footprint is, the way in which the rest of it is. So you can either have the Sheins of the world, or you can have the Patagonias of the world on two different two ends of the spectrum rather. So if I'm looking at this persona, and if I'm looking at creating some sort of narrative for this persona to hook onto, it has to go beyond the t-shirt, right? So that's where we began this whole conversation. Now if I look at the North Star or the purpose, you have to have meaning. So if I look at, say, Rare Rabbit, and if I look at what they're doing, they're calling themselves rare. So why are they rare? What
Yeah.
makes them rare? So is it just the design that makes them rare? So those are the sort of questions that we might need to ask for any one of these unicorns based upon, let's say, their brand name, what their purpose is, and what their actual North Star is. What do you think?
No, agreed, agreed. In fact, I was checking out Gemini and other AI platforms. Even the AI is confused about North Star. It gave
Hmm.
me the AI as growth metrics, or the AOV as the North Star. That is KPI,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That is something on your analytical chart, and it will change from today to tomorrow. If your retention is becomes the sole purpose, or becomes your North Star for tomorrow, right? Your KPI or your metric will immediately change to from average order value to returning customers, right?
yes,
So that cannot be what your company stands for. Now, why did Nike become so big? It did not become big because its North Star was sell number of shoes, or have Michael Jordan as part of Nike, right? Or
yes,
why is Apple different? Or why is Apple still remembered even after Steve Jobs has long gone? Because its North Star was, we stand for design. So the question is, what do you stand for? What is your identity as a brand? That becomes your North Star, and that is something that no one can take away from you. Now, you spoke about Sheen, right? So Sheen, or any of these marketplaces, or any of these aggregator companies, they will always keep on playing on price points. Now, the biggest problem with that is, whenever China comes into the equation, every other country will lose out on price points, right? They have good labor, they have good infrastructure, they are very cheap labor, they have very cheap resources. You cannot compete with a Chinese company no matter what. So the only thing that especially a D2C brand can play at is your brand identity, because that is something especially the Gen Z's flock towards. These are the people who have disposable incomes, these are the people who have certain standard of life. So they are very high on the Maslow's hierarchy. So what they are looking for is the identity of the brand that they're wearing, that identity becomes their own identity. So which brand do you resonate with in that cohort of Gen Z? That is your North Star.
yeah. So that is really wonderful, because if I look at North Star, I think it starts not from the head but from the heart. Actually, so it has to mean something for all of your stakeholders. It has to mean something for your would-be customers. It has to mean something for all the employees that work for you. It has to mean something for your people who are already with you as customers, right? There's many. You said something really interesting, and I want to touch upon it before we move ahead on trying to solve this for people in this space, or companies in this space. and that was about retention. And this is a really critical thing. Here's the weird thing: all of these big marketplaces, they are commoditized, and so they're finding it really difficult. So if I go to a Mintra or a Flipkart or an Amazon, I'm going to get similar stuff. I'm
Yeah.
going to get similar stuff, and the meaning is then converted into a lower order meaning, which is basically connected to three things. One is product, the second is price, and the third is convenience, right? So all of these are lower order meanings. Now if I'm trying to move it to an upper higher order meaning, I cannot just be dependent upon these marketplaces, because but just associating with those marketplaces, I'm already going to a lower order meaning. So
Yeah.
where is the higher order meaning? And trust me, if I'm buying Nike from a store, and if I'm buying Nike from an Amazon or whatever it is, it those are two different experiences, and that is because of the story that I'm already creating in my own head based upon what I'm buying. So in this case, the interesting piece is that the retention is perhaps not the immediate problem that these D2C brands are facing. They're trying to acquire new customers, but what is really critical is how are you acquiring those customers in order for them to be with you for the long haul. Otherwise you're not going to really succeed in the long term. And two, if I look at Byron Sharp's seminal work on retention, you know what he says? He says the more customers you acquire and the quicker you become a big player in the marketplace, you are going to have retention working for you. Now, this is very contrarian to the normal loyalty program sort of retention business that we hear, wherein you're separating acquisition from retention as if they're two different things. What he's saying is, forget about the conventional ways of retaining. Give a really strong way in which you can acquire rapid parts of the market share. And what better way to do that than to find the right story? So how do you want to proceed from here?
Yeah. Right, good question. So you threw a curveball now.
Yeah, I
So
know, I
I think now this is where we are entering into the foray of solutioning,
know.
right?
Mm,
Uh, so right now everybody associates story with what you put on Instagram or what
mm,
campaigns you run.
yeah.
Now here I would like to bring out your point for a D2C brand especially. Your story is not Instagram, your story is your platform. Your
Yes.
story is your product features. Your story is, are you giving a 10-minute delivery, or are you connect, or are you recycling old clothes, or are you providing AI personalization on your platform? Are you doing something that other platforms are not doing,
Hmm.
right? That becomes your story. So yeah, please go ahead.
No, it's interesting that you say that. And so it's a combination of functional stuff and higher order stuff that you were saying, right? And that's true. You don't need to separate the functional stuff and say, oh, we will not talk of products. And you know what the weird thing is, that yes, you should have a presence, either an app or a website, which a lot of these companies do have, a D2C thing, but it should be carried through. So your Instagram can't be saying something else, your
Yeah,
community can't be saying something else. You have to have a coherent picture wherein I understand what is going on across all of these distribution led channels, is the way in which I would look at it.
yeah,
But if I have to now solve for any one of these, right, the way in which I would solve for it is to look at, okay, firstly, what's the persona? So if I'm looking at Gen Z, people say, oh, Gen Z is the segment, but there are, literally many kinds of Gen Z people. So if I look at some Gen Z people, they are all about the practicality, they are all about the functionality, they are saying they're looking through brands. You see, they're looking through brands and say, no, you know what, this is. And the second, cohort within Gen Z can be the exact opposite. So they can be the ones who are bleeding hearts. They're the ones who want to save the environment. They're really angry with the boomers and maybe the Gen Xers for ruining the planet for them, and stuff like that. So it becomes really critical for you to understand which story is going to resonate, right?
yeah.
Which story is going to resonate, because not all stories are equal. What color is your T-shirt really is not just what is written here, but where it comes from, right? And who's made it, and what's the origin story, and so on and so forth. What do you think?
That's a very beautiful line that you just said. So you start with your origin story. Your origin story becomes your north star, or
Mm.
paves the way for
Leads,
your
yeah.
north star, right? The moment your north star is fixed, then you start on your communication. Now your communication, like you said, will heavily depend on the Gen Z, and not just the entire segment, but the cohorts within the Gen Z. So look at the emotional psychology of Gen Z. what is the cohort that you want to target. If you're a Patagonia, you cannot speak to somebody who wants affordability. They will
No.
never go for it, right? So you have to talk to the people who love sustainability. Maybe these are the people who are flocking the let's grow a tree campaigns, or these are the people let's who support let's save the soil campaign. So that is what your design should say, right? And this becomes your entire product line. Now how is this, for example, we take this as an example, somebody who loves the environment. Now how does that translate into your app story or your platform story? Maybe what narrative you're saying is, for every t-shirt that you buy we plant a tree, or for every t-shirt you buy we give the proceeds go to this environmental charity or whatever. We will come with much better solutions once you hire us.
No,
uh,
so the weird thing is that if I look at what you just said, okay, they make a lot of sense. Now, if I have to convert them into some storytelling, right,
yeah.
I would literally make people invested in the tree plantation over here. I would make people understand how those trees are growing, what is going on about a particular piece of land that was arid before and now it's suddenly verdant and stuff like that. So it literally means the conversion, the usage of a story means the conversion of some sort of mission or vision statement into, something which is provoking emotions that you can see. And what better way to show it, right? Than to show it. So a story is not necessarily something that you're typing or reading in a book. It's something which is kind of communicated viscerally. Now,
Yeah.
here's another way in which we can crack this whole story angle, and this was what struck to me because I used that Ben and Jerry's example before. So, if I look at the way in which this has worked for Ben and Jerry's, is because they know who the founders are. They're holding them accountable.
Mm.
They know that they stand for something and they don't stand for something, and they are very public about it, and they have latched onto a movement, they have connected to a trend. Okay, and so therefore their ice cream is almost secondary. Here's a nice way to look at it. Suppose I am trying to buy a t-shirt, okay, and I go on Amazon and I look at t-shirts and I buy a t-shirt. So that's my typical organic customer journey, right? Now imagine that because of the story that you have created, I don't do that. I break the mold, and I actually look at maybe an Instagram and I look at all these trees and whatever and say, oh, this is a brand that I'd like to support. So I go there. So I'm not going there only for the t-shirt or just for the t-shirt. I'm going there because I resonate with that story. And then I'm onto that platform, and then I see all those wonderful products and the rest of it and the story that it stands for, and I buy off that platform
Yeah.
rather than going to Amazon, knowing fully well that I might be paying a premium for that specific product when I buy it, because I'm not only buying your t-shirt, I'm buying your story as well. Does that make sense?
That's a very good point, and this brings me to another very key messaging that we need to deliver to these D2C platforms, right? See, at the end of the day, the business goal remains the same, that people will always choose affordability before they
Yeah.
choose a cause. Maybe for the first two t-shirts they might go for the cause, but
Yeah.
after that the affordability becomes a big factor. So you're not just competing with a snitch, is not just competing with a berry lush or whatever a rare rabbit, right? It is also competing with Amazon, it is also competing with Mintra. So after it's already laid down its story, what makes the people keep coming back to your platform to purchase the premiumized t-shirts which are not at a discount, right? So now, first of all, you have to definitely go for the hooked framework, where you make the ability, the motivation, and the ease of use very clear. Now after that, that brings us to the loyalty programs, and not just the discounts or the points and etc., because no matter how many points you put on your platform, you'll never be able to compete with the kind of price points that
Yeah.
a Myntra or a Flipkart can deliver to you, right? So what is it, what is the part of, or what is the CTA of your story that brings the customer back to you again and again and again, that increases your average order value, that increases your retention rate, that reduces your acquisition costs, right? So number one, your cause or your story that has already reduced your CAC. Why? Because you don't have to keep on pouring money into your performance marketing campaigns to retain each and every consumer. You are basically creating a community. If I believe in something and I know that another friend of mine believes in the same cause, I will recommend that t-shirt to him. Hey, go purchase it. Now once that word of mouth happens, then it is your responsibility as a brand to convert that person from the first time acquisition to a retained customer. That can only happen if your story comes to your platform in such a way that it creates loyalty from the first time user experience.
Absolutely. Well said. I think that we've said a lot of things in this episode. I think it's time for us to look at the key insights that can come our way based on this. I think we spoke a lot about North Star and how it encompasses more than just goals. It has a purpose. The second thing which I would say is that we connected it to the personas and what personas and how to break the journey. We also spoke about retention and how retention is actually helped by acquisition rather than actually the normal standardized discount driven loyalty programs. We also spoke of a trend, which is the commoditization of these marketplaces leading to wafer thin margins. And the only way to fight through is the story. And the biggest insight, Jalavi, you know what is for me is when I'm wearing something. When I'm wearing something, I'm communicating something that goes beyond the feature and the function of what I'm wearing. I'm not trying to show off the softness of the fabric or anything of that sort. And normally, people who are really, really good looking are already models. So, obviously, when I'm trying to stand out with my clothes, right, I'm trying to stand for something. What is it that you're making me stand for, and why should I buy into it? Right?
Yeah,
Okay. I think
that is.
those are my insights.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll just say the last point. It is time for D2C to move away from that tired old retail or e-commerce playbook, right? You cannot compete with a QCOM. You cannot compete with giants like Myntra and Flipkart. So please stop trying to make your platform a catalog. Make it into a book, right? Make it into something that a person keeps coming back to again and again, and also gets the instant gratification of getting a reward out of it when they purchase the product. Make that product purchase in itself a reward. That is how you create a loyal community around you.
Wonderful. I think that's what it is. When you buy a pair of Nikes, you don't buy a pair of shoes. And when you buy a t shirt from Rare Rabbit or whatever it may be, it should not be a t shirt that you're buying. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us. And we'll hope to see you the next time we do this.
See
Cheers.
you. See you.